Hey there, welcome to LSAT Demon Daily. I'm Erik, a teacher with LSAT Demon. Joining me is LSAT Demon teacher Kevin, who is enjoying a brief respite between semesters in 2L. How's it going, Kevin?
Very much enjoying, yes. Thanks for having me on. It's been a while since I've been on the pod, but you know, I love law school, but it is very nice to slow down and take a moment to catch your breath. So,
Absolutely.
yeah.
Remind listeners what class you teach.
Yeah, actually, at the time of recording, I just taught this a couple hours ago. I teach guilty or not guilty, which happens on Tuesday nights at 6 p.m. Eastern time. We do a lot of logical reasoning questions, and we feel super confident about what we're studying and what we're reading. So then when we get to the question, we're the best lawyer in the room. So if you want to, excuse me, if you want to be that best lawyer in the room, then join me on Tuesday nights at 6 p.m. Eastern. We have a great time. It's a great community.
Awesome. I know I have seen some very positive reviews from students who talk up your willingness to really go into depth on explaining answer choices and just being super welcoming to all levels. So yeah, that does not surprise me at all. Okay. Well, I'm tapping into your knowledge today. We got an email here from Q. The email says, "Hi, Demon Daily. I've been studying the LSAT for a while now and have noticed that I often have to reread a sentence or the entire passage multiple times on LR and RC. Do you have any tips on how I might be able to better internalize what I am reading? Thanks, Q." What do you think, Kevin?
It's a great question. And I should say that I think as a law student, sometimes I still struggle with this a little bit just because of the sheer amount of reading I do on a weekly basis. Sometimes you read 100 pages per day. So if you don't like reading, I should say now maybe law school is not the right place for you. But sometimes there are some people who love to read, including myself, who just struggle a little bit about being locked in. So I think there's two general categories to consider when answering this question, and that is the sort of mindset you have before you jump into reading and the strategies you engage in when you are reading. So I'm going to talk first about jumping in before you start reading and getting into a good mindset.
Hmm.
Um, so like I said with law school, you got to be locked in because you're going to be reading a lot and you're going to be reading stuff that is really difficult to understand, like William Gladstone from 1757 writing about some treatise on property. You're like, yeah, that's exactly what I wanted to do on Friday night. Yeah.
Brutal.
Um, so it's just hard to digest, and you know that it's going to be hard to digest. In fact, your property professor probably told you this is the hardest reading of the semester, right? And so you're just like have this mentality that's going against you before you even get started.
Hmm.
And one of the best things you can do is don't just dive in and read, just be like, oh, forget about that. I'm going to read it. I'm going to do my best. I'm going to forget about how challenging I've been told this is going to be. I'm just going to enjoy what I am reading. So if you can hype yourself up and be super positive about property or,
Sure.
on the LSAT, maybe they're talking about science that you don't understand. I don't know, whatever it is. Hyping yourself up can really make a world of difference. Honestly, as lawyers too, or future lawyers, we are lifelong learners in a lot of ways. So when you're looking to read something, I often trick myself into thinking, oh, this is going to be super useful for me, down the road, either as like a fun trivia question. I do trivia. I think it's really fun. Or, maybe some cool tidbit of knowledge that I never thought about before. And so that's sometimes how I treat something, some topic that I'm about to read that I don't really enjoy that much. I'm like, this could be really useful someday, and I'm really going to enjoy it right now. Just take the moment and take whatever I can from it. So, um, yeah. So another thing too, in the mindset aspect, when you're jumping in to read, is to maybe just anticipate, hey, I'm gonna do little chunks at a time, take a break, I figure out a strategy where you can pause and reset and think things through. So for law school readings, for example, you read a paragraph at a time, you take a second to breathe. What does this mean? On the LSAT, for logical reasoning, I think that's every sentence. For reading comprehension, probably still every sentence, maybe even at the end of each paragraph. Just slow down, right? Take a moment and think about what you just read. If you plan ahead and strategically think about how am I going to get through this, that can also really, make everything seem easier to process before you even get started. So
Yeah,
that's my
love
first
that.
thoughts on that category. Yeah.
Yeah, love the visualization of yourself enjoying the passage and finding the passage to be interesting even before you dive in. I think having that positive attitude is huge. And I want to echo what you said about being prepared to reread a sentence or reread a paragraph. I to reassure you, Q, Kevin and I both reread on the LSAT. Like, neither of us get through an entire passage without rereading something. I can almost guarantee you. The difference is, at least I think the difference is probably we never reread entire passages. Certainly not on RC, and probably rarely do we reread the entire argument in LR. Because if you get to the end of an entire passage and realize, oh, I didn't understand any of that, I need to reread, that just tells me that you missed an opportunity to stop earlier. And there was some red flag that went up saying, hey, I didn't understand that. And you ignored that red flag and you kept going anyways. Or you thought, well, maybe if I keep reading, then it will explain what I just read. That's a very common thing to believe, but it doesn't work out that way. So the point being, be comfortable stopping earlier. It could be in the middle of the first sentence. You might not even get through the first sentence. But if that's when the passage is demanding you to slow down and reread and figure it out, then stop then. It's better to reread smaller chunks than to reread the entire thing.
I totally agree. You're doing yourself a disservice by giving up on the tough sentence and moving on. So,
Yeah.
yeah, I totally agree with your point too about rereading. We definitely do reread. I think the difference is we read a small chunk once, maybe twice, but we don't do it much more than that.
Yeah.
As the Q said, they reread it multiple times, which I assume is more than twice. I think with, if we go to the second category, kind of towards strategies that you're doing while you're reading, again, keeping that positive mentality, but also just, if you find a word that you don't understand, take a moment, think about how that fits in, look at context clues. The LSAT is never gonna, the LSAT's not a vocabulary test. They're not going to test you on some word that you don't know. So take a moment to think about how it all fits together. I think that's a really important thing to do while you're reading as well.
Mm-hmm. And I would add to that a related, what we call translation, which just restating something in your own words or thinking about whatever you just read in your own words. If you can't take what you just read and explain it in simpler terms to somebody else, chances are you didn't understand it. So can you translate what you have read into your own words? I think that is a huge step in internalizing what you're reading, which I know you asked about, Q.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that's a great point.
Cool.
Yeah, I always tell my students in class that pretend you have a high school sibling. Can you explain it to them? There was a time where I did have a high school sibling, so that's why I visualize that the best way. Oh, actually, and then one other point about when reading too, I love to use concrete examples. I just did it right there. That's why I just thought about it.
Yes.
The oftentimes you get some abstract thing about, like today in class we talked about global warming just generally, and you're like, okay, well, think about it for a second. How does global warming affect you? If it doesn't, have you read a news article recently that talks about global warming, right? Or maybe I compared it to rich corporations pumping fossil fuels into the atmosphere, right? That's not
Sure.
super specific of an example, but I think it does the job of making that concept much clearer now that you have something concrete you can rely on.
Absolutely. And it doesn't even need to be that closely related to the topic. I use movie analogies all the time, movie and TV. I remember a series of Dave and Daly episodes where you and Alla found a way of getting baseball references in. So
Some of the best recording I've ever done in my life, even outside of the LSAT world. Yes. So
awesome. So yeah, don't be afraid, Q, to use those outside examples, use analogies that connect to your own personal life. That is a great way of connecting to the material. Yeah, glad you said that, Kevin. Anything else for Q?
I think we've passed on some good knowledge here. So I don't have anything else, but I hope it helps Q in his arsenal for when he tackles more LSAT questions.
All right. Sounds good. Kevin, thanks for joining.
Thanks for having me.
And thank you, Q. Email daily at lsatdemon.com if you'd like to ask us a question or share some LSAT or law school admissions news. Thanks for listening.